So, Cosmic Exploration's been out for a while, and all of the missions are now available, so I feel pretty confident in talking about the fishing aspect of Cosmic Exploration. And if you want the quick and dirty answer on basically however long the rest of this is going to be, my thoughts on it are it's really good. It's not perfect, but it's really, really good. And it absolutely continues on with Dawntrail's surprisingly good and well thought out fishing content. So let's dive in, I guess. I don't know how long this is going to be, but we're going to find out. So I wanted to start with the missions because that's kind of the core, like the whole bread and butter of cosmic exploration. Fisher missions were basically in a class of their own. Compared to crafter and botanist, I really think Fisher had the most interesting missions out of all of them. They definitely leaned on Fisher's class design around discovery and understanding a whole in order to actually succeed. So you actually had to either talk to other fishers, you had to experiment on your own in order to hit gold or even silver in some case on these missions. But it was really done on a smaller scale, so I didn't really find any mission that I felt like you really needed to go look something up and you couldn't have figured out on your own with a little bit of time. I think what kind of worked against that though was missions being randomly selected, so it wasn't as easy. That kind of went against it, but that was also kind of something that just happens. I think that was kind of just a thing that was part of cosmic exploration as a whole, and Fisher just kind of got binded up into it. So I think I think though, on a small scale, it was basically you could just do your own little discovery period and just explore these missions and figure them out, or you could look them up and kind of save yourself some time. I actually think that is fine. I think that is very quintessential Fisher in Final Fantasy XIV. So I think that was like a really nice basis for all these missions to be built off of. The other thing that I really liked about the missions, especially starting with like class D missions, and yeah, we're gonna go talk through all these different classes. Class D missions up to C, B, and class A, which are again another class of their own. If you were following through those missions, you were basically teaching yourself the skills that you would need in order to succeed at the next tier of classes. So class D missions, which were built around being a level 10 fisher, could all be done with skills that you would have at or around level 10. I think there was a few when I was testing it that I didn't really think that it was like really good to be at level 10, but if you were level 15 for patience, then it was fine. So that's why I say like 10-ish. I think with those missions though, they were pretty simple, and they were really definitely designed to be like let's get you working with the basics. It was like literally, can you just catch 5 fish quickly, and really like getting you used to using chum, getting you used to using patience, getting used to resting, getting used to large-sized fish. I think that was a really good starting point for those missions. And then as you progress, you'd go up to like the C rank missions, which were at level 50, and then it would be the same thing. It'd be more stuff involving patience. You'd have a little bit more intricacy with what exactly you needed to do, and a little bit more involvement in actually fishing. When you got to, say, class C missions, sorry, no, Class C were level 50. Class B missions, that would be like level 90, 80, 90 fishing. That's when things started to get really interesting. That was the first time that I started hearing people having some like walls. And I think what happened was if you started cosmic exploration at level 10 and you leveled through cosmic exploration, not maybe exclusively, but you did all of the missions before moving on to the next class as you were leveling, you would be going into these new like higher tier mission classes with a better understanding of your skills, and you would be able to tackle that better. But if you were jumping into cosmic exploration already at level 90 or 100, you could brute force yourself through those class D, C, and even B missions, some of those B rank missions, without even knowing what your skills were doing. And so it kind of diminished some of the learning that you should have gotten from those lower missions. And I think that is partially why we saw a bit of a wall that people were hitting when they started getting to the B and definitely those A rank missions. Before today, the fastest way to level is ocean fishing, to level fisher, that is. And because of that, you don't really get a ton of experience utilizing all of your skills. If you're going to be leveling, you're primarily going to be using patience and patience 2. You might be using double hook and triple hook. And while there is decision making and skills and knowledge required for ocean fishing, it doesn't necessarily translate as much as the cosmic exploration missions do to real world, like overworld, I shouldn't say real world, but overworld fishing in general. So I think that was kind of one of the issues that became very apparent day one, was no one knew what their skills were doing. And because of that, a lot of these missions ended up feeling a lot harder than they probably actually were, or they ended up being as time went on. It's not too surprising in the grand scheme of things, but it was definitely something that was unexpected, at least by me, early on, that cosmic exploration was basically going to have or require this much level of knowledge of your skills. And also it would teach you those skills, but if you were already a high level, you kind of just skipped right over it and didn't get those learnings. So I think that is a really good thing about the cosmic exploration missions. I would probably recommend new fishers who are maybe level 100, maybe they just leveled off Grand Company, maybe they just leveled off ocean fishing. I would probably recommend that they start with those low-level missions, only using the skills that are available around that level, and then have them go through it again, even if they're already level 100. Like, just go do Class D missions and pretend you're level 15. Keep your gear, just don't use patience 2 if you've unlocked it. Don't use double hook. Like, those are the things that I would probably do, and then just have them do that. So I think cosmic exploration is now a really useful tool for teaching people how to fish in not just the overworld, but also ocean fishing. I think it is it has a very good parallel to ocean fishing. Now, for missions themselves, so I've talked about the D rank, Class D up through B. Class B was probably the first time that we really started seeing missions that had some teeth to them. You weren't necessarily going to be able to easily clear them and get gold the first time out. And if I say clear, I usually mean gold. you weren't necessarily going to do that on your first time out, especially if you didn't know what fish were in the mission. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. But when we started seeing those later and higher class missions come up, we did start seeing some more variety in the missions. And I will say, I feel like Fisher probably has the most variety of missions out of all of the other classes. I think Fisher missions, by my count, there was like 6 or 7 different styles of mission, depending on how you count it, that we could get. And those were augmented by, maybe you had to get points. Maybe it was do something under a certain time limit. Maybe you were limited on bait, which I absolutely loved that. Maybe you had to use Stellar Hook Set. It was all those different things that really added potential variety to these missions, especially in that A rank where most of the missions are. There are, if you look at like the number of missions per class, A rank because it has the most. So from A1 all the way up to A3, that's the most amount of missions, and that's where most people will spend their time. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about some of these different specific mission types. I don't think I'll cover all of them, but I have some notes on some different ones that I really liked. And I want to start with the one that I really thought was the most interesting, were what I call diversity missions. These were the ones that were having you go to a fishing hole and you were either timed or had to catch one of every fish in the fishing hole. And I thought that these were a really, really fun challenge because Fisher missions at their core are basically, here is a problem you need to solve. Here are your skills that you have to solve that problem. Figure it out. Solve the puzzle. And the diversity missions were like one of those types of missions where we haven't seen that type of fishing before outside of just log completion. There is no fish, like there's no big fish where you have to catch one of every fish in the fishing hole. The closest you get is maybe Warden of the Seven Hues, but even then there isn't a lot of thought that goes into it because they're all just powerful excite fish anyways. So these missions where it was like, here's 6, 7, 8 different fish, go catch one of every single one of them, was really interesting because I found myself getting into a flow, like with Aquatic Inspection 1. This is the one diversity mission that I think everyone has done, where you are in Polistar Sinisi and you have to catch like the 6 different fish, and you have 2 different types of bait, and you have a limited amount of bait, which I thought was also really neat, and I'll get to that in another minute. But with these diversity missions, you had to figure out kind of what's the best way to get to the fish that I need. And so it really rewarded you for knowing how to target fish, reading fish, and like reading what their bite times are, being able to identify the fish that's biting based on the time, knowing when to use slap, knowing how ambitious lure interacts with slap, and the fish you have left on the bait. Like figuring all of those things out was a ton of fun, and not really something that we consistently have done in overworld fishing. We do it occasionally, like we'll do it with, say, Cosmic Haze or Ambling Caltrop. Maru Crab had it for a while, where you just figure out how to target a specific fish, and usually to enable mooching, but not really have we ever had to go and say, okay, I want to catch all of these fish, and have to have like a moving target. So it's like, okay, I've caught the lunar regatoise, but now I have to go and catch like the other, like this other fish over here. How can I get there? And it was really fun to figure that out because it's never the same thing twice. With these diversity missions, I can never say, go here, then do this, then do that, like I could with, say, Maru Crab or Ambling Caltrop. I can never be purely descriptive. It's always a blur of, okay, you got the lunar minnow first, so let's go. Okay, now you have to go and do this instead, and then you have to go doing this, and then you have to do that. And it, I mean, as a guide maker, it's a pain, and it's an absolute pain. But as someone who just enjoys fishing in 14, it is such a thrill to actually be able to have to think through things. And man, do you feel like a champ afterwards when you nail that. And you're like, okay, this has to be here, this has to go here, and then I can go for this one, then that one, and then I'm done. And you lay out a plan and you go for it, and it feels like a dance sometimes. I think with Aquatic Inspection 1, that was one where it was like you start here and then you switch over and you're switching back and forth on baits, and it felt great. And so these diversity missions I absolutely loved because they were really engaging all these things that we know as fishers that we have to utilize and just putting them all together into one thing. So I thought that was really cool. Now, it's not perfect. There was definitely a few things that I think would be helpful to have on these for these missions, and this is kind of a general comment, is being able to see which fish were in the mission. It says you needed to get, say, 4 fish, and that would give you bronze tier. I think that's like how aquatic inspection works, is you get 4, but you get 6 is gold, and each catch is 1,000 points. It would have been nice to know how many fish I actually needed to get to gold, or it would have been nice to know which fish in total were going to be on that mission. Now, I'm not asking for a guide. I actually think that a fisher guide, like we know in the overworld, would actually really kind of ruin some of those missions. But if I could just see, here's all the fish that you're going to potentially encounter on the mission, I don't need to know which bait they're on. I don't need to know what hook set they're on. I just need to know that there is 6 different fish. And, just tell me which ones they are. That would make it a whole lot better for me to make decisions as I'm doing this fishing. So I'm mostly asking, I'm kind of, I don't know, it's really asking, but I'm more like critiquing this on a quality of life thing. It would just make it a whole lot easier for tracking and mentally preparing the plan. Like what I'm saying, it's like kind of like a dance as you're moving through all these fish. It would be a whole lot easier if I could just see which fish are going to be there, and then from there I at least have a mental reference of, okay, I have these fish left, without having to go through and do the mission a few times to actually get the list of fish that I would need. I think like all of the missions could probably benefit from that. I don't think we really need a full guide, though I wouldn't necessarily be against a like specific like cosmic fish guide, which is a separate thing from the normal fish guide that just tracked the fish you caught. I think that would just be a fun little thing for like all the collectathon neuron receptors. But I think at minimum it would be really nice to be able to see on the mission list, you just click on it and be like, description, objective, here's the fish you're going to encounter, and just start there. I think that would be really nice. Do I think it's possible? No. Do I think they'll do it? Probably not. I don't think it's detracting from the missions. It would just be one of those things that would really make it nicer, a little bit easier to handle. The next mission type that we kind of came around were based on collectability. And this is one that I did see a lot of people get snagged up on, pun not intended. Basically, for those who aren't aware, fishing collectibles work differently than botanist and miner, where when you gather something on botanist and miner or even craft, it comes automatically as a collectible. But with Fisher, we actually have a choice between, do we want it to be a collectible or do we want it to be a normal fish? And we use this to our advantage on a couple of fish, like prepping for Garliichthys with the Basilosaurus, and more notoriously, sculptors in Lochseld for Stethocanthus. But with collectibles, you didn't know which fish were going to be collectibles. And if you didn't have collector's glove on, which is what we have to have on in order for a fish to be collectible, you didn't know that the fish was collectible to begin with. So a lot of people on day one were coming into the fish corridor asking me, being like, hey, I'm struggling on this mission. And I go, oh, that's the collectible one. Do you have collector's glove on? Let's start there. And then they would be like, yes, I do. And then I go, okay. It was only certain specific fish, which I thought was interesting because you, again, had to figure out how to target fish, which is our big running theme for all these missions, is knowing how to target fish. And when I say target fish, I mean being able to use your skills and knowledge and the resources you have available to you in such a way that you are specifically focused on catching one fish or potentially two fish, and that one specific fish, and you are only looking to find that one, all the conditions needed to get that one fish, and do that as quickly as possible. That's target fishing. And collectability was a big part of that. And the collectability missions were really definitely like rewarding you for being able to do that for one or two different fish. Some of them were just like, hey, just fish with patience too and collector's glove on and you'll be fine. But for the most part, a lot of them were just like, hey, you need to know how to target fish a bit for that. And I thought those were interesting just because I find target fishing interesting in general. But I definitely felt that the community collectively had to learn how fishing collectibles worked. If I went and looked at my guide on collectibles, there was actually a spike in the number of people who were watching that video around the time of Cosmic Exploration launch. So people were definitely not sure how fishing collectibles worked, and I'm glad those missions existed because now people do know. So I think those were fun. They also let us bring in Patience 2 a bit more. In some cases, we would use Prize Catch, but for the most part, it was good to be able to use Patience 2. Talking about collectability, though, on the other side of that coin, there were size-based missions. So collectability, and I should say the collectibles and the size missions kind of came in two flavors, where it was either you were given a score based on the size of your fish or the collectability of your fish, which are correlated. You would basically receive either a flat score based on whether it was average sized or large, or you would receive a score based on what the actual size was. With the size missions, I really like these a lot because you had to not only target fish and figure out which was the largest fish and then how to get it, but you also had to figure out how to get it at the largest size possible. And there was a few of these that I liked. The name is eluding me now, but it's the what is it? Unidentified aquatic species or specimens or something. It's the one at Hollow Harbor during weather, I think moon dust. And it's a mooch. And that one was interesting because, it was a mooch. Mooch fish I find those always to be interesting, but it rolled well together because you're going to be using Patience 2 anyways. You might as well just go for it and just keep using Patience 2 while it's up. You also could use big game fishing, which was this new skill that was added in Dawntrail. And when it was added, we were trying to figure out, there was no way that they added this skill just to appease the size hunters for fishers. What big game fishing does is it takes a large size fish, so the quality of the fish, not like a physically large fish, just a large size fish, the old high quality. And what it would do is that it would push it to the highest. It's like, someone told me this the other day and I didn't write it down, but it's like the top 2-3% of size that it could be. So if you are, and that's based on your perception. So if you're, say, going for a large-sized fish in island fishing holes, which would be basking shark at Mock Oogle Island, what you would do is you would have to use big game fishing off of that mooch, which is interesting for a few reasons. One, because you need 2 Angler's Art stacks. You need, you can't just use it before the mooch because it cancels mooching opportunities, so you have to spend 100 GP to actually store the mooch, then use big game fishing, and use prize catch or patience too, and it was a very involved skill. And so back to the point, we didn't initially believe that they would just add it for a few collectibles in the size hunters, and so it was really nice to see it come in Cosmic Exploration, and it's used a fair bit. It's used in that one mission I was talking about. You would use it again for one of the new ones that unlocked in the final zone the Nadir after the Nadir lift. Excuse me. After the Nadir lift was added at Ethereal Falls, the chain that starts around there, I think it actually ends there now. That one requires that you have big game fishing in order to reach the size needed to get the points while using Stellar Hookset to get everything that you need. I think big game fishing in this case is great. I think early on we definitely oversold how much it was needed. There's a handful of times, like at the beginning of Fine Grade Water Materials 1. This is a sequential mission, and I'll talk about sequential missions in a bit. Fine Grade Water Materials 1, you have to catch a fish of a certain size, and it's like the largest fish will be recorded, and that's basically what it is. It wants you to catch one specific fish at the largest size possible, and that's just one of those variants of size missions. And early on, we were like, yeah, you need to use big game fishing. It has to be, you have to use it. And in the end, we found out you really don't need to. It's just safety. It's kind of like big game fishing is just a comfort skill in that case. And so there's a handful of times when maybe we overestimated the amount of time we needed big game fishing. But you definitely still need it for a handful of missions. And I think that that's great. I think that's a really fun way to use that skill. So moving on to another mission type, which is catch the specific fish mission. These were very much not used as much as I thought, but if they were, trying to figure out how best to put this. There are a few missions where you have to catch a very specific fish. I remember that there's a couple of like lower rank C or B rank missions where you have to catch like 2 common fish of each one. Aquatic species 2 has you catching like a lunar sturgeon, and that's the mission, is that you have to catch a lunar sturgeon in a certain amount of time. Or the most notorious one would be Paulus Arsenici survey, I believe it was. That is, Paulus Arsenici ecological survey, where you have to catch eyeballing way. We didn't see a ton of missions that were explicitly catch this specific fish. They were fine. I wasn't, with the few that were there, none of them really stood out to me as super interesting. Aquatic Inspection 2 with the lunar sturgeon was probably the one that I liked the most, and probably the most interesting. For this one, you had to, 1, get Aquatic Inspection 1 as a gold rank in order to actually open this up, and I'll talk about sequential missions in a bit. But with this fish, you actually caught it off of a mooch that mooch had to mooch into another, so it was like a double mooch. But that second part of the mooch, which I believe was Moongate cod, you mooched into itself, so it was a mooch loop. But you didn't start with a mooch loop, say like Ruby Dragon. With Ruby Dragon, you catch a cure, and then the cure mooches into itself, or into Ruby Dragon. And that's just a single part mooch loop. With this, in order to enter that mooch loop, you actually had to catch a moonbeam, which you then mooched into another fish, which could be a moongate cod. And if it did, then you just mooch looped around. So it was very interesting. We don't see that type of mooching much. The last time I think we saw that would have been Shadowbringers with Naboth's Saw, where you would be able to mooch Desert Saw off of a Hornhelm, but you could bypass that by just catching a Desert Saw directly. In this case, you couldn't do that. So that was probably the most interesting one of these, but the catch a specific fish missions, like I said, weren't used a lot because they were very binary. It's like you either catch the fish or you don't, and both of them were based on time. But you had missions where one specific fish was basically what you needed to get gold. So like the final mission, I think it's it's one at Ethereal Falls. It's brand new. I just did it this morning. I can't remember, but you have to catch like a nadir alligator type thing. I'm blanking on the name right now. But there's a handful of missions where one specific fish, usually the fish that are based on catch the largest size fish or catch a collectible level, a certain collectible level, those were basically just catch specific fish missions with tiers. So if you didn't catch it, you still had a little bit of forgiveness on your points. So in some cases, you would be able to get silver or gold. In this particular case, with Lunar Sturgeon, you could still get silver or gold, but it wasn't, or silver or bronze, but it wasn't based on whether or not you caught the fish. It was just how quickly you caught it. So there was no it wasn't really forgiving in that sense. So I think the catching specific fish missions were fine. They were good practice for big fishing. I would probably recommend those to folks who are wanting to get started in a Realm Reborn big fishing. Lunar Sturgeon in Aquatic Inspection 2 is basically the same loop as Ninja Beta in Mordona. So I think that's a good practice. Going back to cosmic exploration is a very good learning tool for fishing. Period. So next would be the catch X number of fish mission. So this would be like food stuff emergency, supper emergency. Early on, this is where a lot of people were struggling, and this is where the double hook and triple hook didn't work in cosmic exploration myth kind of came about. I really liked this mission, but because it let us do things that we haven't really been able to do all that much before, and if we did, it was just in ocean fishing. So with these, the goal was catch 15 or 18 fish in total. It doesn't matter which fish you got. It just had to be, in 5 minutes, catch 18 fish. And so naturally people would be like, oh, I'm going to use double hook and triple hook. Well, if you just start double hook and triple hooking all of your fish, you're going to find pretty quickly that you only get one. And so a lot of people were confusing that with it being broken, because in the overworld, there's very few fish outside of big fish that do that. And where if you use double hook, you only get one in return. It's kind of the opposite here in cosmic exploration, where a lot of the common fish only gave you one yield. They only returned one fish, even if you use double hook and triple hook. But the big fish, or the green background fish, which I don't think they classify as big fish, they're more like rare fish, those will actually give you more than one. And people weren't noticing that because they were usually a little bit harder to find. I think it was Food Stuff Emergency up at Hollow Harbor. That one was the one that a lot of people were citing as confusing because you had to find the fish first, and it wasn't that common unless you knew how to target it. And that was the solution to the puzzle of that one, is being able to target fish, the fish that you needed to get 7 off of a triple hook. And then you would do that twice, and you'd have 14, and then you just have 2, like you'd have to get just like a couple more fish, and that was super easy. So these, I think, are really interesting because they really make you use your GP. They also really pushed your GP management and got a little creative. One of the things that I really liked, and I learned this on aquatic processing materials, or aquatic metals processing, was because we have a yield of 7 off of triple hook. If we actually use prize catch before triple hooking that amount of fish, it's actually cheaper. We actually get enough GP back to be able to use a high cordial and get another 700 GP that we could then use for another triple hook relatively quickly. So that was the strategy on aquatic metals processing, where you would open with just use prize catch and cast out, and you would wait for the heavy attack site to bite. You would triple hook it, reel it in. You'd get 7, which is what you would need for one item. You would then use a high cordial, use Thaliac's Favor, give you 300 GP at that point, because you would use 6 in total Angler's Art stacks of the 7. So you'd have 300 plus the high cordial. You'd get 700 again, and you could just get a second triple hook relatively quickly. You don't usually see that in the overworld because the yields don't work that way, and we're not usually in situations where we have to do that. So it was a really interesting turn of how skills were used, and I thought it was a really nice little synergy on how the skills in the prize catch and like the yields from the holes actually all work together. So you really only got to see that in ocean fishing, because that's really where those yields are that large, maybe diadem. But for the most part, it was something that you would use heavily in all of these missions where you had to catch X number of fish, and that kind of became like the go-to strategy for that, and working around the fact that you couldn't use Modest Lure, you couldn't use Chum. All of these missions were putting limitations on you as a fisher based on either how much GP you had, or how much time you had, or the bite times of the fish, not just the holes, but like what were the bite times. There was a couple of times when if you used Chum and Ambitious Lure, which you had to use Ambitious Lure, you actually could not differentiate between 2 different fish, and that could actually cost you the mission. You had to then stop using Chum, and so it slowed things down, and you had to be a little bit slower and more deliberate. And because you didn't have that Chum to speed things up, you really had to make sure that you were focusing and you were understanding of what you needed and what conditions needed to be met in order to say, that is the fish that I need. So I think that is like the one big thing with all these missions that did well, was that they really made me use all of my skills except some. One thing that I was a little iffy on, but I think now I'm actually okay with, was you don't get any prep. If you use it, like, you can't hold on to Angler's Art stacks. There's no way to just prepare 10 Angler's Art stacks before a mission. You have those all wiped when the mission's over. You can't like pre-slap anything. You can't pre-chum. You can't do any of this prep. You have to factor that in during the mission, which I thought was incredibly fun and very fascinating of a design decision. And I think for the most part, that is one of the reasons why I think that the Fisher missions really stood out against botanist and miner and crafting. Was there was really nothing you can do to prepare in a class, in a job. Like Fisher as a job is all about preparation. So taking that away, adding in that limitation that we cannot prep for certain fish and for certain windows really added to the engagement and I guess the interest that I had in all of these missions. It's the limitations that I'm finding more fascinating with these missions than I think anything else. And knowing me, I've probably said that 3 different times for 3 different things, but I really genuinely think that the cosmic exploration fishing was, again, it was in a class of its own. I don't think botanist, miner, or any of the crafters really held a candle to how much thought and deliberate design went into their missions. I think Fisher it felt like it got special treatment, and I'm perfectly okay with that. Another limiting factor, too, that came up that I thought was an absolute beast of a design choice. I think that this was genuinely a great idea. Whoever came up with this at Square Enix, you deserve a nice vacation and a raise, was limited baits. There are a handful of missions, like on the diversity missions, like on what is it? Aether Chemical Species 1, I think, is like one of the time missions at 6 a.m. You only have 10 or 12 bait to use. And this is brilliant of a design choice because now you have basically forced a fisher to learn when is bait consumed. And that's not something that we've really ever had to deal with in ocean fishing or in the diadem or in overworld fishing, because usually you just have a huge stack of it. And if you don't have a huge stack of it, you don't really care that much because you're like, oh, well, I only got 5 bait. I'm not going to really do anything with that. The fact that they were limiting the number of bait we had on some missions was amazing. One mission that stood out was where you had to catch gold cheek. I can't remember the name of it, but there's a fish called gold cheek, and you had a limited number of bait. And what it was trying to teach you was a hidden fish, which gold cheek will not bite unless the hidden message appears, and then it has a chance. So the strategy for that one, and what I saw people doing, I should say first, is they would go, I don't know how to catch this fish. And they will just they'll be like, oh, it uses ambitious lure. Okay, I'm going to use ambitious lure over and over and over again, not caring about the hidden message. And what they'll do is they'll just wait for a fish to bite. And you can't do that with hidden fish when you're on a limited amount of bait. Because if you don't get the hidden message, that fish isn't going to bite at all. You cancel that immediately to save your bait. And so it was this really interesting turn on how to think about fishing that like I said, we haven't seen that before, and it caught a lot of people off guard. That was a mission that I made a guide for that I think it was I made it not because I thought it was hard, but because it was something that a lot of people were caught off guard on. And I thought, hey, this needs to be known, and it is a technique that we haven't seen in the overworld because we just supply our own bait. If you're going for big fish, you probably have a few hundred red maggots sitting around, unfortunately. You don't have that in these missions. And so limiting our bait options, which they've done for a good handful of missions, really made you go, oh, okay, hold on. I need to know exactly what fish I'm going for, and I need to know the conditions under which they bite. And if I don't have it by then, I have to stop because I need to conserve bait. And this leads me into something that we didn't admittedly know for a while because it took time to figure this out. But at least within almost all of the A rank missions, every fish is identifiable. You can look at the time it's taken for a fish to bite on a certain mission under a certain bait, and you can go, it's that fish. We didn't know that early on, so that made it a little bit more challenging. But for the common missions, like the missions that a lot of people were asking about, we figured those out pretty quick. But they made it so basically all of the fish could be identified if you knew what to look for. There was very few fish that overlapped. And if they did overlap, it wasn't a huge consequence because you either needed them both or you could isolate them based on slap. So if you just slap the other one, you can still bite the other one. And that was like the solution for at least one mission that I can think of. And so the fact that all of these fish were identifiable just really, to me, was hammering home that they were like, we need to teach people how to properly fish. Let's learn all these techniques that we don't teach in quests, that we don't teach anywhere else, and let's show them how to do that. And that is what I think Cosmic Exploration has done really well, also on top of the other things that I'm saying. And don't worry, I have some negative stuff too that we'll talk about in a bit. But the fact that every fish is easily identifiable, to me, speaks loads as to how much thought they put into these missions. Now, I wanted to talk about sequential missions. So, sequential missions were this type of mission where if you got gold on this, like on a starting mission, and these were all denoted by some Roman numeral, so 1, 2, or 3, depending on the point in which the mission you were at. If you started and got gold on a 1, then you could unlock the second mission in that sequence, assuming that it was actually unlocked by when you were doing it. Now that everything's unlocked, then all the missions are done. But sequential missions, the way that they work was you get gold on like the first step, and that unlocks the second step that you can do. But if you turn in that first gold mission, you have 5 minutes to accept the second mission. And the same thing if you turn in the second mission, and within 5 minutes, you have to start the third mission. And this initially was a little bit of a problem. And I actually find this kind of fun, but it's a problem on some missions because your GP takes a while to regenerate. Especially for fishers who have a larger fishing pool than botanist and miner. The sequential missions could end up being a little challenging when you are low on GP. I'm not going to say any of the sequential missions were impossible on non-max GP without like a cordial at least, but it was definitely a step up in challenge. Fortunately, we found out that you can just hold on to a previous mission and not report it, and your GP still regenerates. So that limitation that I think was trying to be brought up didn't really end up landing because you can just bypass it. I am of the opinion that I would rather see that go away if there is a way to get faster GP regeneration outside of missions. I don't think it should be like crafters where they just give you all your GP back. I think that there should be a regeneration. In my opinion, I think it should be tied to the Cosmoliner to really encourage you to move around a little bit and maybe go do another mission. But that was like the one like big like the big thing with sequential missions was you have to do them in order. You have to get gold on the predecessor to unlock the next one, and if you turned it in, you have 5 minutes to start the next one. And I thought these were a great idea. And what I expected going in was that the difficulty would ramp up as you would go through, and that didn't necessarily pan out for all of them. But what I would say is the involvement did increase. So if we look at fine grade water materials 1, that starts you off with a simple catch this fish. It wasn't a specific fish. I think it was a size based thing, but you would do that. You would have to catch one specific fish to get that size. And you didn't have to use much. It was like surface slap, prize catch. Maybe you would do big game fishing. But it was a really simple straight catch. That was it. The second mission was a diversity mission, fine grade water materials 2. That one had you catching, 6 different fish in this fishing hole. That was a step up in terms of involvement and knowledge that you would actually need. And really had to think about, what was the approach you were going to take? Which was this, like, which fish are you going to go for first? Which one's going to take up the most time? Which most GP? Which one is going to require, the most involvement? Like that one in that specific step was a big step up. If you completed gold on that one, you would unlock the third one, and that would be fine grade water materials 3, which was a collectability, or which was a points mission. It was like a size-based points mission. And that one was based around getting a specific fish, and you had to get multiple of them in order to get all the points you would need to achieve gold. With the sequential missions, specifically fine grade water filter materials 1 through 3, you had to get gold on that last one in order to unlock certain missions on other classes. So if you wanted to do eel rations or crystallic gems, you had to get gold on fine grade water materials 3 and this other mission. You had to get gold on a culinarian line to unlock all of these different things. And I thought that was cool. I thought that was really great that they gated certain missions, and they were specifically cross-class missions. And I'll get to those. I'll talk about those next. I thought it was really great that they made it so that you had to do all these different things to unlock it. One, it didn't mean that everyone could just beeline all the missions and be done with things. You had to actually talk with people and figure out, which missions have you done that allowed you to unlock it? Which ones don't I have, which means I need to do them to unlock it? I think eel rations took a couple of days of folks to finally be able to actually get it unlocked. And I think it's great that it's encouraging people to do things on other jobs as well. In Fisher's case, for me, it was, hey, Fruity, you should go do some crafters, which I wasn't anticipating to do, but I'm glad I did. I think for the rest of the Final Fantasy community, it's more, hey, you have all these crafters, maybe you should go try fishing. I think that that specific set of sequential missions plus the cross-class missions, which I'll talk about again here in a minute, those were more of a way to get people playing like other jobs, and I think it was less of getting people off of Fisher and more of people onto Fisher. But I digress a minute. So sequential missions I think were really cool. There's 5 total chains that we have on Fisher, and I was saying like the difficulty would increase, and in some cases it did. In many cases I felt like it didn't. I was really expecting it to be like, you have to start here and it's like really easy, like you are guaranteed to complete it. And then the next one was, you're likely to complete it. And then the third one was like, maybe you won't actually complete this and get gold. that wasn't necessarily the case in my experience. There was definitely a lot of missions, Coexisting Species 1, I'm looking at you, where that first step was basically like, you might get gold on it, maybe. And if you did, the second step was, yeah, you're likely to get gold on it. So I think with sequential missions, concept-wise, they're really good. I really want to see those come back. I really want to see more with those, but I feel like there's two things I would probably want to do. I would probably do a ramp up in progression is probably I was expecting the ramp up in progression, and I didn't necessarily get that. And two, I would love to see them go cross mission class. So not cross jobs, but I would love to see the first step of a sequential mission be a class C mission, and then the next one be a class B mission, and then the third step be an actual like class A mission. I think that would be really interesting. I think that could be kind of fun, but I think sequential missions were meant to be the driver for relic and point grinding for those who don't have certain cross-class missions, and for those who for those who don't have like certain weather missions unlocked. I think that that's kind of where they were fitting in the whole like mission grand scheme of things, but I'm not too sure too much on that. But that's kind of what I was hoping to see. I'm not upset with the sequential missions. I still think they're great. I'm still happy they're here. I love them. I think they are some of the most fun missions that we have on offer. But I definitely would say that I didn't get what I was expecting. And that's not a bad thing. That's mostly just like oh, okay. Yeah, no, this works too. Sure. Yeah. Uh-huh. But like I said, the big hang up with sequential missions, I definitely think, was the GP regeneration. We were able to find a way around that by holding the report, but that definitely felt a little weird, and I don't know if I would expect to see that come back in the second planet. I don't know if I want to see it come back in the second planet, because I think it would be a whole lot more fun if you were really limited to that 5 minutes and you really had to manage your GP, not just in the mission, but for the whole stretch. I think that would be way more interesting and at a new level of engagement and interest, just in general. So I want to talk about cross-class missions now. So cross-class, when I say cross-class, I mean like cross-job. Basically, it's for Fisher, we had missions where if you were an alchemist, blacksmith, culinarian, or gemsmith, goldsmith, sorry, you would have a mission that both Fisher and those jobs could take. So I thought this was really interesting. Some of the notable ones would be like eel rations. This is the culinarian cross Fisher job quest. This is a very fun mission in my opinion, and actually is still a very strong point scoring mission. Basically next to crystallic gems. The only reason I put eel rations over crystallic gems is because eel rations doesn't require a ton of GP management, whereas crystallic gems, it does. It requires triple hooking, and like I was mentioning earlier with like the triple hook prize catch like little synergy thing, it requires that, so you can't chain it as easily between like one mission to the, like you can't just do it over and over again as easily as eel rations could. Refined moon gel was the alchemist cross quest. This one didn't require any unlocking. This was one of the ones that you got just by itself as part of the base set. This one was a little bit weird compared to the other ones because it was one of the few quests that were just it was an A rank quest, and it was just a straight up RNG. There was no lure manipulation. There wasn't even any sort of way to like cancel early. You just had to hope you got all the fish you needed. it was a little weird among all the crafting missions. It's not terrible, but it was definitely standout, and I was kind of hoping for a little bit more from that one. For Goldsmith, you had Crystallic Gems, which I mentioned. Crystallic Gems is it's good. It's fine. But I think what is done a little bit better is aquatic metal processing. This is another one of the base set cross-class missions for Blacksmith and Fisher. This one utilizes triple hook and the prize catch strategy I was mentioning earlier, but less points, but it was still pretty fun to do. So I think the cross-class missions, it's really interesting. I think that the fact that they were like, yeah, we want to have people do Fisher and crafting, and I should point out that this isn't exclusive to just Fisher. Botanist and Miner have their own as well. I just think that it's really interesting that they decided to make this choice of let's have them, let's have you fish up stuff and then craft it. And my mind started going like, oh, it'd be really cool if maybe there was like a botanist and Fisher cross class where you had to gather the bait as botanist and then fish with it, or like a cyclical one, like a cyclical crafter one where you have to start on Miner to gather metals, which you then craft using like armor smith into lures, which you then have to use as Fisher to catch a specific fish, and that's the goal of the mission, and you have to do that within a certain amount of time. I think that would be really interesting. I know I'm kind of going ahead of, I'm looking forward when I should be looking kind of back, but it was one of the things with cosmic exploration in general that I had was there's a whole lot of interesting things that they could be doing with just what they gave us with Sinus Ardorum. I think that there is a ton of potential for interesting and fun missions and activities that you can do on future planets. And so I'm really hoping that they're not afraid to lean into those. I think we shouldn't be afraid of having triple class quests. I think that the way that, let me preface this by saying, I think what I've noticed was as the moon got more developed and more missions were unlocked, the involvement and quote unquote difficulty of those fishing missions increased in difficulty, basically. Like the involvement and the difficulty just went up. So when we unlocked the Gleam Slope, that was when we got like another set of missions that were a little bit more harder than the base, like more harder than the base missions. They're not the hardest missions, but they weren't as easy as like the Class A1 missions. They were all, these were all Class A missions, but these weren't just like easy Class A1 missions. They were a little bit harder. When the Nadir Lift gets installed, we then get Ethereal Falls. And those missions, especially the sequential missions that both start and end there, are both very intricate, and you have to be very careful. I found myself very easily screwing up with just a little bit of focus loss. I think if they wanted to add a triple class quest, having it as part of the final mission or like the final zone would make sense to me. I think that could be an interesting way of introducing it, and I think that progression of difficulty of each zone unlocking, assuming they do that again, I'm assuming they are, but with that zone being unlocked each time, or however that planet's progression happens, increasing the difficulty and involvement of the missions and thus the rewards, like these new the Ethereal Falls, like the Nadir Lift Slope, that those missions are like, one of them's worth like 4.9k points at gold, extremely high. It's like the highest one, I believe. If they just, add the balance to that, I think that could be fun. I think that would be something that would be interesting. So overall, I'm really interested in these cross-class missions, and I think it's a really interesting way and a really good way. I don't even say it's interesting. This is a good way to get people to do other jobs. It's a very clear-cut design choice of we want people doing other jobs than just maining one. We want to encourage them to level. You can level in I almost said the diadem in cosmic exploration. So why don't you just level up into it, and then you can do these cross-class missions. And like it's all in one now. And I think that is a really good design choice for just crafting and gatherers in general, not just fishers. So there were a few mission types that had this one skill called Stellar Hookset. Stellar Hookset was a unique skill that Fisher got on certain missions that doubled the point value of whichever fish you used it on. And you got one of that fish, and it would bypass inefficient hooking from Patience 2, which basically meant that you could use it with Patience 2. And basically just doubled whatever the points were going to be. Stellar Hookset was an incredibly smart ad, because this is not just a skill that you have to use on some missions like Coexisting Species 1 to bridge the gap that you would be basically bridge the gap that you have to span worth of points. It also was a skill that requires very deliberate use. You could not just spam Stellar Hookset on whatever it is that bit. You really had to know which fish you were going for, which conditions it had to be under. Like, could it be average? Could it be large? You really wanted large. And you had to know when it was going to bite, and you had to know how to get it to bite relatively quickly in some cases. And if you could do all that, you were rewarded with Stellar Hookset. And that, I think, is what was so cool about Stellar Hookset, was you had a skill that rewarded smart play and very tactical play. And it really did just add some nice spice to some missions. If you saw it, you knew that there was going to be a very specific fish that you wanted to use it on. You didn't have to in some cases. That was the fun thing, was in some missions, and I think that was Fine Grade Water Materials 3, you didn't necessarily have to use it on like the one specific fish that was the biggest points. You could use it on some other ones. There was a couple of other times when the mission was just long enough that if you got the fish earlier enough, you could use identical casts if it was allowed. And then just wait a little bit and then cast out. But if you wanted to be efficient, you had to know how long the fish was going to bite, so you didn't wait too long, because you wanted that fish to bite right after Stellar Hookset came up. So you were casting out when like 30 seconds or 25 seconds were left on Stellar Hookset cooldown. I think that was a really fun add to some of these missions. I would love to see it come back on the next planet. And I kind of wish we used it a bit more in some of the more popular missions on Sinus Ardorum. But I definitely would love to, if it came back on the next planet, like they just didn't give us a new skill, I'd be a little like, oh, it'd be nice to have something new, but I would not complain. Like that wouldn't be a deal breaker for me. Because I think that there's a lot more that we could be using with Stellar Hookset, and some interesting ideas of like, maybe you had to get a big game fish with Stellar Hookset, and you had to use both of those combined in order to get a certain amount of points, in order to get gold. I think that there's a lot that they still haven't done yet. And there's a lot that still hasn't been done yet. I think is kind of the summary of some of my other thoughts on Sinus Ardorum. Cosmic exploration, just in general, right now. I'm recording this mid-June. 7.2.5 has been out for a few weeks. We're about to have the first live letter. I think that there was a few places that they could have really done a little bit more. Fisher didn't have any reduction missions. The botanist and miner had a lot of missions to the point where people thought it was bugged, and they had to put out that little thing saying, hey, ethereal reduction is right there. Reduction is a big part of fishing when it comes to crafting, so not having that, I'm assuming yet, with certain cross-class missions or just missions in general, felt a little sad, but we had enough variety that I wasn't, it's not a detractor, but it was more of like oh, you're right, we don't really have those. That would make sense that we had them. So I'm hoping we see them in the second planet, but it's maybe there was just too much going on at one time that they didn't want to do reduction. I don't know, but I definitely could see it coming up with like a cross job mission where you have to reduce, a certain fish down into a certain sand or material that you would use to craft something. Maybe you have to reduce it down into another bait that you use to catch another fish. I think that would be fun. I think dynamically having to get bait mid-mission would be a really interesting way to spice up basically all the mission types. And yeah, that's really all I have to say on that. Just would like to see more reduction missions. I think as I'm finally coming close to the end of my notes here, one thing overall, I guess a lot of these missions were definitely RNG based, I think would probably be the best way to put it. Like refined moon gel, pure RNG. But really, all of these missions I felt were pretty fair. There were some that I feel like they're A3 classes, and they were like really late adds. So like they were added after the Nadir lift was added. And they were timed sequential missions. So if you over at Ethereal Falls, those to me feel like legendary missions. I'm almost wondering if some of these missions were like, yeah, we want you to get gold on it, but in reality, you're probably just going to be going for silver. We found that getting silver on like eel rations over and over again during a Moondust window actually yielded more points than just going for gold every time, because the way that the points are set up, silver is 4 times the base value, gold is only 5 times. So what you would do is you would just go get silver 4 times and then gold on the last one, compared to just getting like gold 3 times or something like that. I forget what the exact numbers were, but the way the math worked out was you got more points doing silver. So I'm wondering if some of these missions were just meant to not necessarily, like gold was the like a literal gold star. It's like, cool, you didn't have to do this, but it's cool you did. And I'm noticing that a lot on those end cap sequential missions, like Aether Chemical Species 3 and Unidentified Aquatic Species 3, like those types of missions, like the newest ones that were added within Deer Lift. Those I look at and go, yeah, maybe we weren't supposed to consistently get gold on those. Maybe it was just like if you got gold, it would be nice, but really we're expecting you to just shoot for bronze and silver. Looking at like even at the scoring, some of their bronze base tier points are more than some of the gold points that you would be getting. So overall, the missions felt fair if you knew your skills, if you knew how fishing worked. The way that I said it is if you've caught fish in a Realm Reborn, if you've caught big fish, in a Realm Reborn, like you're over level 50, you already have all the skills and knowledge that you would need to get gold. You may not have the practice, you may not have the experience, but you know how to do that. And you know what you need to do. You just haven't practiced it. You're not familiar with it. And that's what I think a lot of people kind of ran into with that as well, was I got to practice this a little bit. Some of these missions had prog, like actual prog, to figure out, what's the best way to do it. How can I do this? How can I practice it? I found myself doing that on some of these newest missions within Nadir Lift. So I think overall, though, missions felt pretty fair. Variety felt fine. I think some of the strategies got to be a little reusable. There were, at least not in like the first week, but once we started getting a good picture of all the missions and we knew which fish were in the missions, and we knew their bite times, and we knew their bite strengths, and we knew, which lure they responded to, I could look at a mission before even starting it and know what the strategy would be. And that was a little, for me at least, that was a little like, oh, well, but also for someone like me, I fish more than most people. I know more than most of the population, so it's not going to come as clearly, I think, to some people. So that might just be like a self-inflicted wound in a way. But overall, though, I think the missions were fine, and I'm pretty happy with how they ended up and how they looked and how they felt. I'm really excited to see what the next planet brings to us. But actually, one thing that I did just see on my notes here that I forgot to mention was lure usage. I mentioned it briefly. In some of these cases, you would use ambitious and modest lure over and over again. You'd use lure stacking, basically, to draw out certain fish, which is typically what we recommend. This for overworld fishing, sometimes in rare cases, ocean fishing. If a certain hook set is the subdominant, then it is extremely likely that the lure of that hook set is useful and optimal to use. I found myself using lures in a few places where I was limited on bait and on time, or on time, I should also say. And I was like, I have to be getting like powerful hook set fish. Even though it was dominant, there was just enough precision hook set fish to waste my time. And I didn't care about them, so I would use ambitious lure because it wasn't going to lose me time based on the bites, and it was going to make it so that each of my baits were very effective because I was always trying for the fish that I needed. So this was, I think, one of the first times when I really found myself using lure on dominant hook sets, which I thought was cool. I thought that was really interesting, and it was a nice twist on the lure usage that we haven't really seen yet. So I think I used that on assorted alchemical materials at the southeast pond. That one, I used that a few times. I've used it a few other places, but I don't remember the specifics. Just that it was there. So I think that was an interesting use of those skills. Beyond that, the rest of the other skills pretty much were used as we would typically use them. On some collectible missions, we would use prize catch over patience 2 more often than not for various reasons. But beyond that, it was pretty much what you would expect. We pretty much used all of the overworld fishing skills except makeshift bait because you couldn't prep Angler's Art stacks, and 5 Angler's Art stacks felt like it was too deep. That was like a little bit too... If you had 5 Angler's Art stacks, something had gone wrong in a mission. At least outside of the missions where you had to catch like a ton of fish. For the most part, that wasn't something that you would use. So you didn't really use makeshift bait. That was a little disappointing. But for the most part, we used mostly all the other skills. Except spearfishing as well. I really could see spearfishing shining really, really well in this mission format with this design of fishing. I think that there's a lot that they could do with yield fishing, with just like target fishing, ethereal reduction. I think that there's a lot they could do with spearfishing. So I hope to see that in the future, and I hope that this is future proofed, and down the road I can be like, yes, I said that we could do that and it would be great and it would be there. But I think overall, the actual fishing experience in Cosmic Exploration was great. I had a ton of fun. I still have a ton of fun, even though I've already got my 500,000 points. I'll still keep getting points because I just enjoy going in there and having fun, and I think the rewards were okay. I'm using it to stock up on materia. I think the challenge aspect of the missions is a really good format, and I'm saying this slightly biased because my Fisher Challenges project launched last week. You should check it out at ff14fisherchallenges.com. But overall, I think this is a really nice evolution on, just Disciple of Land, Disciple of Hand. I guess they're calling it lifestyle content. I think this is a really, really nice jump on that. And I'm excited to see more. I think with the relic being so tied closely to it, and the relic I think is really cool with that it starts at level 10. So if you come in at level 100, it's not useful. I really don't think it's great. But if you wanted to start leveling, you could start leveling with a relic and have something carried with you the whole way up. That is so nice. I love that so much because you get so much more use out of that relic for people who are just starting to level. But the one downside, though, I think with the relic is they just made the special buff reduce the cost of powerful and precision hook set again, and it's not even consistent. I really think that that's a cool idea of having special persistent buffs. I really want them to use this more. Not just on the relic, but just stances, and I might make a video on this as well. I would just love to see more of that in 14 content in general, not just fishing. I think it would be really fun in botanist and miner. I think it would be fun in crafters. I am sure there's a way that you could make it work on the combat jobs. I would just love to see that style of relic and more of those little buffs, permanent passive buffs, just all over the place. I would love that. Anyways, back to my conclusion. I think Cosmic Exploration as a fisher, if you liked fishing, you are going to absolutely adore Cosmic Exploration fishing. If you didn't like fishing, you are going to learn something. That's it. You're going to learn how to fish, and you have to for this. But if you really, really liked fishing, and you're like, I'm a fisherman, I've caught all the fish at least once, you are going to really appreciate Cosmic Exploration fishing. If you haven't done so yet, I highly recommend that you do. Go try it out. It is a ton of fun just trying to solve all these little puzzles to figure out, if I use this skill with this bite and all this, how do I make this work? And on-the-fly decision making. It is everything quintessential about optimized fishing, all bundled up into these little micro challenges over and over and over again, and it's so much fun. If I had to rate the current Cosmic Exploration, it's definitely an 8 or a 9 out of 10. It's really good. I'm excited to see more. I'm hoping we start seeing more soon. But yeah, no, I think, like I said at the beginning, Cosmic Exploration just continues to lead, or just add on to Dawntrail's just fishing content bonanza. Dawntrail genuinely has so far been one of the best expansions for fishers. We just keep partying in the corner while everyone else is out dealing with their own stuff. All the fishers are just sitting in the corner having a party because we just keep getting all this great content. So really, really excited to see more. But that's my notes. And as of right now, this is only about an hour and 25 minutes. I honestly expected that to go longer, but I did try and reel myself in a bit. But yeah, so those are my thoughts on cosmic exploration in a nutshell. I really hoped you enjoyed listening to this. So for now, good luck and thanks. Happy fishing.